No. 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 No.
They put up a tall fence covered with black tarp and topped by barbed wire, surrounding Lake Colette at the center of Juniper Valley, so that no one could see what they were doing. 2 of the 3 local cop cars were stationed 24/7 at either end, one to the east and one to the west. This all went on for 3 days while some unknown official body did what needed to be done. Then, overnight, the black barbed wire fence was gone, replaced with the normal chain-link variety. A few middle school kids dared Kevin Witter to apply a pair of wire cutters and sneak in. My little half-brother knew Kevin. The kid claimed to have seen unmarked vans and a bevy of sunglasses-wearing government agents with automatic weapons surrounding a team of scientists in hazmat suits, dragging the carcass of a monster out of the water. The monster had 10 legs, the skin of an alligator, and the body of a squid. Or the body of a shark, or matted fur, or feathers, or teeth. It changed per telling, and it was all bullshit. I'm guessing Kevin Witter either chickened out before doing the deed, or else was picked up by the cops as soon as he approached the fence. At the end of 3 days, some early risers in Juniper Valley reported seeing 3 unmarked cars heading east on Skylark Road, towards the highway and the Air Force Base and the Palmdale Airport. Whatever government agency was operating behind the blockade, searching the lake, they were gone without a trace by the time the sun came up. And whatever they found, they weren't telling. The cops were clueless. All they told us townsfolk was that, due to a bacterial infestation, we were not to swim in the lake until farther notice. I will never swim in that lake again, and I hope to God they killed them all. I stayed in Juniper Valley during the summer with my father. He and my stepmother loved it there, loved the isolation and the small-town lifestyle. Though I would hesitate to even call Juniper Valley a town, it's an unincorporated cluster of ranch-style homes planted like a pimple among the Sierra Pelona Mountains. In the 90s, the population of Juniper Valley and the surrounding hills was 800 and change. There was one general store in town, one gas station, one church, and one dirty little inn with a bar restaurant. Anything else one would need could be found in Palmdale, a 45-minute drive east, through miles of gridded power lines and golden flatland, dotted with silos and scrape metal. The town resembles a bowl with Lake Colette at the basin, and streets and houses arranged around the edges, along the slopes of the surrounding hills. Calling Lake Colette a lake is also stretching things a little bit. It's a sag pond right on the San Andreas Fault, which cuts straight through Juniper Valley. During droughts, Lake Colette would drain to a glorified puddle, a mossy marsh of waist-high weeds. There were quite a few rainy years during my childhood. Lake Colette would remain a proper body of water then, even in the midst of a hot, dry summer. I'd look out my bedroom window at the lake, below the dim circles of light cast by the 2 street lamps on Skylark Road. Pitch black like a tar pit. On moonless nights it seemed bottomless, and I felt as though it could be a kilometers deep well. A black hole. I grew up. My months in Juniper Valley became skull-crushingly boring. My dad and stepmother worked, my half-siblings attended a summer program at their school, and my friends were 70 miles away. The nearest library was almost as far, and the rabbit-eared TV picked up 3 channels: local access from Palmdale, the Bible channel, and assorted infomercials. It was my step-grandmother who told me about the Will Fell Animal Sanctuary. She went to church with a lady who ran the place, a retired park ranger named Kathy. The shelter was a nonprofit funded solely by donations with an all-volunteer staff. Kathy owned an acre of hillside land off Skylark Road, just west of town, a 15-minute walk from my father's house. I was 13 the first summer I volunteered at Will Fell, and I went back every summer after. They loved me there. By they, I mean the only 2 staff members. Kathy, an earthly woman in her 60s who functioned as CEO, manager, accountant, and primary caretaker of the animals, and Jacques, a 27-year-old autistic man who cleaned cages and walked dogs as part of a government-subsidized program. And I fell in love with the animals. There were about 60 of them, homeless dogs and unwanted cats. There were 2 huge kennels in Kathy's large backyard built by her sons, one for dogs.
Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be going on a tour of the deep web, and learning about the horrific consequences that you will face if you decide to go in too deep. Be warned, these stories are not for the faint of heart, and are graphic and disturbing. You have been warned. In order to proceed safely through the deep web, I have invited Elders Vault to help guide and narrate some of the stories today, so you're in for a real treat. What's more is once we're done here, he and I are going on a deep web exploration. So be sure to follow us over to his channel when this video's over and check out what the deep web is really like. But for now though, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I am a 17-year-old high school male. Although I'm not a total outcast, I'm not exactly the most popular guy in school either. Overall, I would say I do a pretty good job of being friendly and accepting to all the social cliques. The nerds, the emos, the athletes. Even one of the cheerleaders. You name it, I'm a pretty versatile person, socially speaking. That being said, I am somewhat of a loner, with very few close friends, and usually prefer to keep to myself. My reserved personality has caused me to spend a lot of time on the internet. It was about 6 months ago when I heard one of my few close associates mentioning something called the dark web. Or was it the deep web? I'm not really too concerned with the official name. Whatever it is, it's clearly an aspect of the World Wide Web that is far different from what you would typically find on the regular internet. At least, that's what I gathered from all the horror stories I kept hearing. He would describe things like crush porn, live executions, and all sorts of despicable acts that would make your stomach turn. For a while, I dismissed his stories as little more than attention-grabbing. At best, I believed him to be grossly exaggerating what he was seeing. But eventually, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out for myself. Looking back, I certainly wish I hadn't. I asked my friend how I could access this part of the web. Long story short, he hooked me up with a Tor browser and helped walk me through the whole arduous process of entering this strange uncharted territory. Once I was in, I was navigating through the deep web like a piece of cake. As it turned out, much of what he was described to me turned out to be true, as I discovered countless links to all kinds of violent videos, disgusting pornography, and hitman websites. None of it really caught my initial attention, and a few days later on a Sunday evening, I decided to log back into this place, purely out of boredom. As I began surfing through the deep web a second time, I came across a video called Cabin Torture, something I had missed the first time round. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I clicked on the link. As it turned out, it was a live event rather than a pre-recording. The video began with an unseen cameraman wandering seamlessly without aim through a dense forest at night, the only illumination coming from a large flashlight he was holding. For several minutes, I heard the consistent sound of owls hooting, coyotes howling, and the crunching sounds of sticks on the ground as the cameraman trampled over them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he arrived at his destination, a nice, quaint little cabin. He walked around the back of the cabin and shone the light on through a window. I could make out a large bed with a man and woman sleeping peacefully side by side, before the cameraman walked around and advanced towards the door. Seemingly with no effort, the man was able to pick the door lock and quietly enter the cabin. The flashlight continued to serve as the only illumination as he made his way through the living room, down a dark hallway, and into the couple's bedroom, which of course the door was wide open. The man entered the room and shone the flashlight directly on the husband's face, apparently wanting to awaken him, and he got his wish. "Who the hell are you?" But the husband was cut off, as the intruder smacked him very hard with some kind of blunt instrument, which knocked him out cold. This caused the wife to wake up and begin screaming loud enough to wake the dead. She was also a receiver of a blowout knock to the head. I hoped for their sakes the head blow would have been enough to kill them and spare them from the agony of a far more painful death. But it wasn't to be. The intruder turned on the lamps in their rooms and began the process of tying both of them up, the husband to a chair in the corner and the wife to the bedpost, each by her arms and legs. What I saw next was nothing short of traumatizing. The husband and wife both regained consciousness at about the same time, meaning that whoever the intruder targeted first would be in a position where they would be forced to watch the brutal torturing of their most beloved. He targeted the wife first, pulling down her pajama bottoms. I then saw him pull out a huge butcher knife from his backpack and proceeded to insert it into her vagina. I cringed in absolute disgust as he rhythmically began to thrust the knife in and out of her while she screamed at the top of her lungs, and the bedsheets became drenched in her blood. Her sobbing was utterly heartbreaking, and that wasn't even the most despicable part of it. No. The worst was when he panned the camera down to show that he was touching himself. What kind of sick bastard do you have to be to derive pleasure from this sort of thing? When he climaxed, he forced his junk into the woman's mouth and forced her to swallow. But he didn't kill her yet. He then turned his sights to the husband, who was still struggling with the rope binding him. The intruder slightly pulled down the husband's pajamas to expose his endowment, and in no time, he used the knife to slice everything off, leading to a muffled scream underneath the gag around his mouth, and for pleas and mercy from his still living wife. That wasn't enough to satisfy this monster's bloodlust, though. He plunged the knife deep into the man's belly and sliced it in real good, spilling out the man's entrails onto the floor, and finally stabbing the man straight through the heart, leaving him to die. The wife begged the intruder to let her go, but he was having none of it. He pulled out a .22 caliber pistol from his pocket, pointed it straight at her head, and blew her brains out. At that point, the video feed cut off and a message read, "Thanks for watching," flashed across my screen. I sat there utterly stunned and motionless, not knowing how to process what I had just seen. Just then, an internet chat box appeared from the corner of my screen. A messenger, presumably the site owner, asked, "So, what do you think?" I didn't even bother. I shut off my laptop, took it out the back, and smashed it to pieces with my father's sledgehammer. Afterwards, I retreated back to my bedroom and cried like a baby. Never in my whole life did I think I would observe something so vile, so disgusting, and so unimaginably horrific. I don't know if those psychos will track me down. I don't know if I could ever open up to my parents or friends about what I saw. All I know is that I will never access the deep web again.
So, I was doing what I do best the other day, and by that, I mean sifting through that depraved cesspool of the internet known as the deep web, and just generally being a lazy sack of shit. I spend a lot of time doing that, just randomly clicking links to things I probably shouldn't, and then being horrified by what lies on the other side. I've seen a lot of shit on there. Gore boards, doc spins, torture sites, IRL rape, animal cruelty. You get the picture. You've all heard the stories. Everything wrong with the human species can be found somewhere on the deep web, or so they say. I find it all fascinating. To glimpse people when anonymity takes hold and see what monstrous things people are capable of behind closed doors. It's like peeling back on a Sesame Street play and showrunners having a satanic orgy backstage. You see people for what they really are. Monsters. So I began my voyage, monster in hand and freshly stoned mind ready to be mortified. From my closet, the inflatable erotic doll I had been given as a gag Christmas present looked in a disapproving manner with a lifeless, open-mouthed stare. Don't judge me, Miley. I performed the usual diagnostics and booted up Tor. I found myself on the hidden wiki soon after, staring at the dozens of links available for the taking. I saw little of interest, so I quickly switched over to DuckDuckGo. I pondered upon what type to search in for a bit. You have to be careful how you go about browsing Tor, and randomly entering murder or torture into a search bar could get you into a world of trouble. You never know who's lurking. I finally ended up typing in one word: sick. That ought to get some interesting results. The results were initially less than stellar, but soon I did find myself on an apparent blog of some sort. Darkness of the Soul. Edginess level, maximum. I glanced through the blog and found dozens of entries ranging from paranormal, conspiracy theories, short stories, and real-life crime essays. It was actually pretty interesting, and the guy who wrote it indeed pretty gifted in the vernacular department. I spent some time glancing through them until one entry caught my eye. It was titled, "Dark Sites on the Dark Web. Are They Real?" I found my interest piqued, so I clicked it. The article listed several relatively prominent and notoriously vile sites, like Cannibal Cafe, Cruel Onion Wiki, Violent Fantasies, and Playpen, none of which were what I was really looking for. But then, one caught my eye that I didn't recognize. It was listed only as the site with no name. The author was even kind enough to provide a link, to which I clicked without a moment's hesitation. This hidden site has been seized as a part of a joint law enforcement operation by blah blah blah. I groaned while reclining in my swivel chair and downing the remainder of my monster. They've always have to take away the fun. Just as I was about to click back though, I noticed a small detail which drew my attention back. In the lower left-hand quadrant of the page, there was a slight discoloration that caught my eye. I've seen that same message hundreds of times, but this one looked different. On a whim, I highlighted the section with my mouse. Just as I had suspected, a series of texts lit up with strands of numbers. The numbers just looked like gibberish at first, but on a closer inspection, I noticed a single Russian word. Voiti. Translation, enter. Luckily for me, I speak a bit of Russian, so I recognized the phrase right away. I hovered the cursor over the word and watched as the pointer shifted to indicate a hidden link. Clever, hiding behind a smokescreen like that. That's a first for me, so I clicked it. The page loaded for a while before finally opening to a new page. It was black with red font, and, much as the article suggested, had no title on top of the page. It appeared to just be another catalog site. There was actually very little of substance anywhere on the page, just random links with no real indication as to where they may lead. I clicked several of the links, but all of them turned out to be dead. Well, except for one, that is, which opened to a disgusting image of a woman shitting on a guy's face. I nearly vomited at the sight of it. I have a pretty strong stomach when it comes to gore and violence, but poop is my kryptonite. Why would someone allow someone else to defecate on them, I will never understand. But then again, there's a lot of things I'll never understand, especially regarding the dark web. I knew it was a troll on their end, and I'll admit, they got me pretty good. I knew they were hiding something though. I mean, why go through the trouble of constructing an elaborate decoy if there wasn't anything illegal going on? Sure, creating the backdrop of the infamous government agency message wouldn't be too difficult, but if nothing illegal was going on, then why bother doing it at all? Mimicking my efforts from earlier, I highlighted the page once again. Sure enough, there was something at the bottom of the page which had been all but invisible beforehand. It was a series of numbers, spaced out horizontally. I thought at first it was another address, but there was no .onion at the end. The numbers were organized as follows: 4, 9, 11, 6, 2, 7, 12, 1, 3, 8, 10, 5.
I did deliveries for a popular fast food place in my town during the end of my high school years. My friends all had jobs there too, but they purposefully scheduled us on separate shifts to prevent us from goofing off. It ruined all the fun, but the money was still nice to have. Mostly I would have no interesting stories about my work days, but this one night was an outlier. It was the weekend and I was working until 10. The orders were coming in steady, so I was doing deliveries one after the other. I was going in, grabbing the bag, driving to the house, and repeating that process non-stop. I think it was around 9 when I got this order, but I can't say for sure because I was kind of mindlessly running the deliveries at this point. I got the bag and pulled up the GPS location for the address, then started driving. Halfway through the drive, I realized this was taking me in a different direction than usual. I'd been this way before, but there weren't a ton of houses over here, so most orders would be in the other direction. I drove, not thinking too much of it, until I saw on the GPS that I was 1 minute away. Looking around, I didn't know a single place I could be 1 minute away from. There was nothing but trees and the road. No houses or shops. Literally nothing. Regardless, I drove until the GPS said I'd arrived, which was just a quarter mile further down. I pulled off to the side and did one quick look around just in case I was missing something. Then I called the customer. The phone rang for a while before they finally picked up. "Hey, I drove to the address you put in, but it doesn't seem to be right. Can you please confirm the address?" I asked, hoping he just made a typo or something. He repeated the address back to me, but it was the same as the one I had in my GPS. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Wait, I think I see you." I looked up ahead, and down the road, there was a person waving at me. I drove up next to him, but I had a bad feeling in my gut. I rolled the window down, and he immediately started apologizing, saying the address was tricky to find sometimes. He pointed behind him, saying his house was down that road. This road he was referring to looked more like a half-beaten dirt walking trail that went through the forest. I smiled and said it was alright, handing him the bag through the window. He smiled back and thanked me, watching me as I pulled back onto the road and did a U-turn. I looked in my mirror at the man still standing on the side of the road and just thought to myself about how strange that was. Not even a minute into the drive though, something started to feel wrong. My car was bumpy and leaning to the right, and it was getting increasingly worse by the second. It started to feel dangerous to even drive, so I had to pull over. Before doing anything else, I called roadside assistance. I didn't know what was wrong yet, or if it had anything to do with that man, but like I said, I had a bad feeling in my gut, and I wasn't taking any chances. After getting off the phone with them, I got out and looked at my tires. My front right tire was busted, and that was the tire closest to where the man was standing, so I put two and two together pretty quick. I looked back down the road where I came, and in the distance, I saw a figure walking toward me. I hurried into my car and locked the doors. He approached slowly, probably knowing the exact situation I was in. As the man got closer and closer, I contemplated whether or not to risk driving on my busted tire, but by some miracle, a truck came down the road and stopped behind me. They got out and asked if I was okay. I saw the man walking quickly back the way he came. I took this opportunity to tell the man from the truck of my suspicions, and he stayed there with me until the roadside assistance truck came, which was only a minute later. I got the police involved, and I wasn't surprised to find out that the name and address the man ordered with was fake. I don't know what he was trying to do, but making me drive all the way out on an empty road hidden by the forest makes me think it would have been more than just a robbery. When I was 17, I worked at my mom and dad's local restaurant. We were never a busy place, but it was enough to get us by. I ran the cash register and occasionally would help out waiting tables and cleaning. My parents were really nice about giving me flexible hours whenever I needed for school or whatever. Over the summer though, I'd be working full 40-hour weeks, typically from the afternoon until closing. This was my second year working there, and during the last half of summer, my parents had me do the closing tasks for most nights. I'd be there for maybe 15 to 30 minutes after restaurant hours to count the money and clean up. It wasn't difficult or anything, but it was just a tiny bit of extra responsibility. Anyway, on this Friday night, my dad and I had a somewhat busier night than usual. We were the only two workers there, aside from the assistant cook. At closing, my dad helped me out for a few minutes, then locked up the front doors and left for the night. I had plans with a friend after work, so I was rushing to get everything done. When I finished, it was a few minutes past 11. I walked out the back door, which led to a small employee parking lot, but I was taken back when I saw some guy right next to my car. He was looking through my windows, like he was trying to see what was inside. "Hey, get away from my car." He looked over at me, showing his face for a split second, then ran into the trees behind the parking lot. I didn't see him long enough to get a good look, but the only feature I could really make out was his long, unkempt, and patchy beard. He was a freaky looking guy, and I was feeling really uneasy as I drove away. A couple days passed, and on this night, it was just me and the assistant cook working the closing shift. It was a weekday, so it was slow, but just 20 minutes before closing, a guy walked through the door. He sat at a table without saying anything. Now, this was one of those restaurants where you go up to the register first to order, then sit down, so this was kind of weird. I waited for a few minutes until I walked up to his table and asked if he liked to order anything before we closed. It was then that I saw his long, patchy beard and recognized him as the guy from the other night. I was so caught up in my thoughts I didn't hear his response. I tried to tell him to leave, but I stuttered, and it came out with zero confidence and assertiveness. He looked me in the eyes and asked for a dark roast coffee, completely ignoring what I said. I turned around and put the order in. I thought maybe this was all a misunderstanding somehow, but I'm pretty sure that was just me lying to myself to make me feel less scared of him. He sat at the table, staring ahead until his coffee was ready. I walked it over to him and reminded him that the place closed in 10 minutes, so he'd have to leave soon. Of course, he didn't respond, so I walked away. I went up to the assistant cook, who I never really talked to before, and told him about this guy and my uneasy feelings I got from him. He patted me on the shoulder and said to get started on cleaning for him. Then he went to the front. I watched from over the counter as he nicely told the guy to leave. The man got up and made brief eye contact with me from across the restaurant, then turned around and walked to the door. I watched him leave, and as he extended his arm to push the door open, a very easily recognizable object was revealed. A gun wedged in the back of his belt. I thanked the cook and told him everything in more detail so he understood my concerns. He called the police without even hesitating, and while they didn't find the guy, he never came back to the restaurant. I'm grateful for our assistant cook, who I'm keeping anonymous for his own privacy. He could have easily just left for the night and let me deal with my own problems, but his kindness likely saved my life that night. When this happened, I was 23 and worked full-time at a pizza shop in my local area. I'm not sure if things were going on before this, but as far as I know, everything started and ended on this one night. Me and my best friend, Tim, worked the night shifts at this pizza place. It was a real small shop, having just 3 or 4 tables inside, because we specialized in delivery and takeout. Both me and Tim got our jobs there while we were in college, but just never left. Being in a quiet, rural town too, the job wasn't too much work. Never had busy days really, just a steady flow of orders sometimes. On this night, there was a light storm outside, and in return, business was slow. There were a few orders here and there, but overall, we didn't have much to do. By 10 p.m., Tim suggested we started cleaning up the place, and maybe even clocking out 15 minutes early. I went with it, grabbing some rags to wipe the tables with, when the phone at the front desk rang. I picked up after a few rings.
How can we help you today? Hello?
I waited another 5 seconds before putting the phone down and shaking my head. Just some prank call, I thought. I went back to scrubbing the tables, but at the front of the store, I saw a glare coming from the window. There was a car parked a few spots back. I couldn't see too well through the window in the rain, but there was definitely a light on in the car, like a cell phone or something. The pizza shop was on an individual lot, and there were no other cars, so that was the only reason I noticed them. A moment later, the phone rang again. Tim was closer, so he picked up this time. I could hear someone's muffled voice coming from the phone, and after a short talk, Tim hung up. At the same time, the light in the car turned off, and they drove away. I told Tim what I saw, and how it was a little weird, but he shrugged and said it was just some old man who was ordering a pizza for delivery. I looked back at the now empty parking lot. It wouldn't make much sense for someone to order a pizza for delivery from right outside the shop, so I figured Tim was right and it was nothing. He started making the pizza while I continued cleaning. 10 minutes later, Tim boxed it up and handed it off to me to deliver. I ran through the rain to my car, then pulled up the address on my phone. 11 minutes away. Not too bad. I pulled out and started making my way there. The roads were dead, nobody out at all. Google Maps took me down to a neighborhood full of large homes, then had me turn down a long driveway that led to a cul-de-sac where there were 3 more driveways, each leading to a different house. I went down the one Maps told me to and pulled up next to the home. It was one of those houses, but pretty old looking and not very modern at all. I parked the car and double-checked the address with the house number, then picked up the pizza and ran up to the front door.
Hello? Pizza delivery.
I took a step back and looked at the front of the house. All of the lights were off. I dialed Tim's cell and had him call the guy who ordered. My phone buzzed a moment later, and Tim told me that his call went straight to voicemail. I shook my head in frustration and ran back through the rain to my car and got in. I tossed the pizza on the passenger seat and started backing out. This wasn't out of the ordinary, getting fake orders or dead deliveries, but it still annoyed me every time. When I got back, Tim was cleaning and said there were no more orders, so we were good to finish up and head out. I tossed the pizza in the trash and started helping him. Both of us were in the back, cleaning the ovens and wiping the prep counters, when a sudden bang came from the front of the building. We looked at each other, then ran to the front. At first, we didn't see anything, but then Tim spotted a small crack on the door. I walked over and opened it, and right outside was a heavy rock, big enough to throw and do some damage with. I looked around, seeing the parking lot was completely empty and nobody was nearby. Both of us were really confused and kind of freaked out. We talked about maybe calling the cops, but neither of us wanted to deal with that right now. Put things in perspective, 10 minutes before we were off, and if we called, then we'd be here for another hour at least. The crack on the door wasn't too big, not really